Welcome, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Race Talk Revolution with Lane and Eugene. Race Talk Revolution is, of course, where your voice matters. And today, man, our topic is awkward to awesome. From awkward to awesome, creating sustainable, diverse relationships. And our guest speaker today is the Dr. Amy Narishkin, who is a cultural intelligence strategist, and Amy is the CEO of Empowering Partners, LLC. So as always, during our conversation today, we ask that you please remain muted. And then when we get to the Q&A section, we will instruct you on how to raise your hand. And during that time, during the Q&A, we will invite you to activate your camera because we want to see who is speaking. And then at that time, you get to express your questions and comments to our speaker. And I'll remind us at that time also is when you ask a question and make a comment, make sure that we keep it, to about under a minute or so that we have time to get to the answers and then the other people who may be in the queue to ask questions. So until then, though, we ask that you please give Dr. Narishkin your full attention and limit the use of the chat as much as possible, because I know that sometimes the conversation gets so good that we want to get into the chat, but also what's happening when we do that, we kind of take our attention away from what's being said. Mm-hmm. All right, so as much as possible, limit the use of the chat. As usual, I want to remind everyone that Race Talk Revolution is a loving, inclusive platform designed to strip away the false beliefs that keep us separated as a species, to uncover the not so hidden truth that we all really do want the same things in life, and to heal the wounds created by systemic racism. You see, Race Talk Revolution is a safe and brave space for people of all backgrounds to share ideas and opinions and explore the nuances of systemic racism while together growing our capacity for effective anti-racist activism. The Race Talk Revolution community is committed. We are committed to practicing radically inclusive love. So what does that mean? Even if we do not understand or agree with what's being shared, we ask that you listen with respect, appreciation, and empathy. You see, it is our commitment that every person be encouraged, heard, and appreciated, because here on Race Talk Revolution with Lane and Eugene, every voice matters. Now here's my beautiful co-host, the Reverend Lane Cobb.
Thank you, Eugene, and welcome, everybody. So happy it's Wednesday. We get to see your faces. And I get to introduce our speaker for today. Dr. Amy Narishkin is a thought leader, strategist, and consultant, helping organizations make the shift to cultural intelligence. As CEO of Empowering Partners, LLC, she works with C-level executives, management teams, and organizational leaders to effectively implement the tools for cultural intelligence, collaboration, and innovation for growth. Dr. Amy is also a certified administrator for the Intercultural Development Inventory, IDI. As a cross-cultural talk leader and successful entrepreneur, she coaches both individuals and organizational teams, creating exciting, culturally intelligent places to work and interact. With a PhD in adult education and 30 years of experience in teaching, consulting, managing, and research, it is her belief that to achieve true return on investment and engaging place to work, organizational leaders must create a culture of safety and belonging. Dr. Narishkin, so happy to have you. Welcome to Race Talk with Revolution with Lane and Eugene.
Thank you. Lovely introduction. I appreciate your generosity.
Oh my goodness, indeed. Well deserved. So would you mind starting us off today by maybe laying some groundwork and letting us know first, what is diversity, equity, inclusion? What is DEI? And what is your role as a DEI consultant? And then second, what exactly is cultural intelligence?
So I hear three questions in there. Whew. And first of all, I just want to thank you for including me. I love seeing all these faces, and thank you for having your cameras on. This is an extraordinarily diverse group, so just thank you for showing up. I appreciate this. DE&I, well, we could take each one of those words, diversity, equity, inclusion, or we could take them kind of in bulk, and maybe that'll be simpler place to start, that when we're doing diversity, equity, and inclusion work, what the overall goal is working to ensure that everyone in the organization feels valued, heard, and engaged. In fact, when I was brought into a mid-sized hospital group, the gal is working on a doctorate in nursing, and she asked me if I'd come in and consult with her on her research, but also help the leadership group begin to think about diversifying. It's an all-white, predominantly male group. And I asked her, what do you mean by diversifying? What do you want? What are you hoping for? Nothing. She didn't have words for it. I said, do you have a sense of what you'd like to accomplish when you diversify and create more equity and inclusion? She didn't really know. She just knew it was the right thing to do. And I said, what about making sure that everyone feels valued, heard, and engaged, from the person who's mopping the floor to the doctors to the leadership team? And she goes, that's it. That's what I want. I'm like, all right, that's where we start. So that's our purpose. Let's see, your second question. Did I answer your first question, what DE&I is?
Yes, ma'am. And a little bit about what your role is as a DEI consultant.
Well, allow me to clarify, if you would. I'm actually not a DE&I consultant. I am a cultural intelligence strategist. Typically, DE&I consultants are people of color or people that represent or come from an underrepresented group. And they're teaching about the other, however you define the other, whether it's because of race or gender or religion or nationality. Whereas I'm a cultural intelligence strategist, which is why I, as a white lady, could be in this work. I'm very simply, well, sometimes it's simple, sometimes it's hard, teaching the skills, so that the skills in the heart, so you can feel free to talk with just about anyone. And because I've been teaching for 30 some odd years, that I can do. I can't imagine what it's like to live moment by moment, day by day, under systemic oppression. So can't speak to that, but I can teach pretty much anyone, if they're willing, if they've got the mindset for it, the skills and the heart, so that they can hear people out for the first time, and then pick up on patterns in their organizations that are not serving. And that would be my goal. When I say not serving, meaning that people are feeling sidelined and silenced, and we get to upend that crap.
Okay, well, that goes to my next question, which would be one as to what, and we might be getting ahead of ourselves here, but please keep reminding us what cultural intelligence is, right?
Okay.
Because that's—
Can I get that defined for you? Can I show you a
oh, that'd be
slide?
great.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I could even tell you a story to illustrate it, if you would allow me to.
You have the floor.
Wow. Okay. Whew. Hold on one second. Show all windows. Oh, come on, Zoom, work with me. There it is. Here, I can make it more grown up. So cultural intelligence is quite simply this. It's what enables us to be in conversation with a person who's different from us, so that they feel seen and valued. And what I've discovered in my research around cultural intelligence is that there are these 5 elements, and you'll recognize them. Curiosity. So often we think, well, and particularly my fellow whites, we think that if we're curious about somebody, that's acceptable. But the thing is, when we come in hot with questions, particularly if you identify as white, you may not realize that historically, people of color have had their children taken from them by white people, or people of color have been deported because questions are being asked. So coming in hot with questions, because I'm just being curious, isn't necessarily a kind thing to do. So what we need to do is when I'm not saying don't be curious about others, please. We absolutely need our curiosity when we're coming across and talking with people that are different, however we perceive the difference. We want our curiosity, but we also want some contemplation. We want to slow it down and take a breath. We want to observe how we're feeling, seeing if we're triggered, and we want to proceed with a little bit more grace. And we're going to find some courage to quite possibly hear somebody out and maybe learn something that might be disconcerting for us, so that we can learn their context and express compassion for their context. Those are the 5 elements that keep showing up for me when I'm expressing, when I'm practicing, when I'm teaching cultural intelligence. Would you mind if I shared a story with you?
Oh, please.
So I'm thinking about this one guy who said to me, actually, I had just finished a workshop. I want to get this right. I actually wrote this story down and I shared it. It was just really important to me. It was during a workshop I was facilitating on compassion. I was operationalizing compassion for the group. And this white guy, he calls me over, and his name's Jeff. That's not his real name, but let's call him Jeff, right? And he's a mid-level retail manager, and he called me over to his group to ask a question. He said he wanted to know if he should have taken down his Confederate flag. I asked him where it was, and he just told me it's up on the wall in his garage. So I asked him what the problem was, and he told me that it took up the better part of the back wall. And when the garage door was up, the neighbors could see it. I thought I understood why that was problematic, but I was curious about what prompted him to put it up. So I asked him, and it was interesting. He said, well, it represents part of US history, my own history. Watch how the cultural intelligence comes into this story. I said, so it must be pretty important to you. Then why do you think the flag needs to come down? And he explained, well, after the workshop last week, I got to thinking about what you'd said, that my impact is more important than my intent in cross-cultural relationships. He went on to explain, because my neighbor is Black, I didn't want to hurt his feelings. So Jeff took down the flag. And he said, now I don't know if I did the right thing because I was more focused on my intent than my impact. Well, I told him he'd done a great job, great first step in building that relationship with his neighbor. He was thinking about his impact, but he wasn't sure if he should have taken it down. And I said, well, did you ask him? That'll teach me to have my phone on. Excuse me. I said, did you ask him? And he said, I wouldn't know what to say. I asked him, well, what about what you just said to me? I took down the Confederate. I apologize. I don't know how to silence my phone right now. I took down the Confederate flag in my garage because I thought it might hurt your feelings. What was the impact of that flag on you? And he said, I can say that. And I told him, sure. Well, he nodded and he turned back to the group. And at the next workshop, I asked Jeff how it went. And he said, I never asked him. I decided the flag wasn't that important. And our families have been getting together every Sunday for barbecue dinners and really enjoying getting to know one another. Well, later in the morning, Jeff told me how grateful he was, not only for the new friendship, but now he also knew he could check his impact on how he's coming across to people. And if you think about this situation, Jeff was able to build an authentic relationship with his neighbor because he demonstrated that he cared about their feelings. Well, this ability to appreciate another's perspective and change your actions to show respect, that's cultural intelligence. What questions do you have for me about that story that got interrupted really rudely twice? Norman's got a
Yeah.
question. Are we allowed
Norman's
to?
got a question. Absolutely, Norman.
You're on mute.
Norman, I think you're muted.
There you go.
Okay. I just wondered, how does he know he had an impact if he'd never asked his neighbor what he thought about it?
That's a good question. In this case, he didn't know if he'd had an impact, but in this case, the lesson for him was realizing that he could potentially have an impact that wasn't kind and wasn't thoughtful and considerate of how the other person felt about that flag, that flag can be perceived as threatening, life-threatening. Hadn't even occurred to him before. That's the goal. I want people to start realizing that there's other contexts. It's not just about loving your neighbor as yourself. It's more like loving your neighbor based on their context and what they need, which means you're going to have to figure it out and gently ask or wonder, do your reading, do your research.
Okay, I can accept that. But I've spoken to people who had Confederate flags on their arm and stuff like that. I always ask them about it.
And
I really wanted to have a conversation about it.
absolutely. And what have you discovered?
They don't really understand what it's about. It's just something that they've always done.
I think kind of like this guy, Jeff, it was just part of his history. And he didn't realize what seemed to be a benign symbol to him had a traumatic effect on people around him. Which is why I'm really glad that he got some cultural intelligence.
Right.
Okay.
So
Thank
cultural intelligence. Thank you, Norman. So I'm hearing cultural intelligence really is about becoming more aware of our effect on the people around us, right? Not
Yes,
just relying on our own sense of knowing what we know.
exactly.
There's a real growing edge there, you know, and pushing against that place of discomfort where we don't know what we don't know.
Exactly. There's actually a reason. I'm going to share a slide with you. There's a larger.
Sure. And folks, hold your questions. If you have questions, keep your hands up. It's okay.
Let me provide some context here. Typically, when I'm introducing the concept of cultural intelligence, there's a full workshop around this. And so I'm coming in kind of hot with a very new concept. People know about intellectual intelligence, and they know, so often people know about emotional intelligence, which is awareness of your feelings and the feelings of others. And emotional intelligence is very much foundational to cultural intelligence. But I can feel all day long with you, Lane, but if I don't take into consideration your context, it may be off-putting. I've got to consider your context if I'm going to express compassion in a way that's meaningful for you. So if we're going to do that, one of the things that y'all might appreciate knowing is that there are 5 stages to cultural intelligence. And I think you'll recognize these stages. You've met people who are in denial. And cultural intelligence isn't something that we just have, it's something that we develop. And it's something that I'm growing. I'm really glad I'm 56 years old doing this work, because there's no way I had cultural intelligence probably even a decade ago. It's something that I'm growing every day. And particularly because I'm part of the dominant culture, my lack of awareness of my impact on people, even though I'm doing this work every day and writing about it every month and teaching on it, I'm dang if I'm not waking up every day. But what's intriguing is somebody who's in denial is it's often not intentional. They may have grown up in a white working class neighborhood and never met somebody and never had modeled for them curiosity about differences. So they may know that there's a Mexican restaurant down the street, but didn't occur to them to find out anything about it. The next stage of cultural intelligence is polarization. These folks, people in this stage, are polarizing in their language, very aware of differences and judgmental of them. things are good, bad, right and wrong, black and white. These folks have they don't hesitate at all to call people out. And all of these stages are needed in society. We need people in polarization, in that we need people to point out the problems in society. Then there's minimization, where most of us tend to be in. This is cultural blindness, minimization. We downplay differences. People in minimization, you might hear them say, well, I don't see color. The intention's good, but it doesn't land well. It's kind of like saying, Eugene, I don't see your manhood. It just doesn't work, right? It makes somebody feel invisible. Well, minimization is followed by acceptance. And when we move into acceptance, now we are curious about differences, we're aware of them, and we're ready to begin to adapt our behavior to show deep appreciation or respect for those differences. So what's intriguing in this is that we think in society we're in polarization, but we're actually 66.7 people around the world are in minimization. This is what we practice on one another in society. I had originally thought it was an American problem, but then I got trained up by IDI and I learned that the IDI has been back translated into 18 languages. And I've used it with clients in India and China and the UK. And minimization shows up globally with 2/3 of minimization. But then when we're under heat or people are coming in hot at us, it can push us back. Like on social media, we'll fall back into polarization and use words that we don't even mean to. Here's what minimization is about. It focuses on what we all have in common. And here's the problem, Lane, is it assumes that everyone's experience is the same. This is what we're doing to one another in society. We're assuming that Lane's experience is a whole lot like Amy's. Well, it's not. It can't be. And it inadvertently dismisses differences and pressures non-dominant culture people into assimilation. And by me, I mean assimilation, changing inside as well as outside. And it makes people feel invisible. It's not in a society like in the United States, where we kind of have a suck it up, stiff upper lip way of being. It's really well intended. People, when they minimize and downplay differences, they're really trying to be kind. They just don't want to upset people, but they don't realize that it's not kind to make people feel invisible. So this is what I mentioned earlier when I got started. This is one of the tools that I teach in the workshop, is that when we're coming across people that are different and we're not sure what to do, rather than come in hot with questions, we can slow down, take a breath, observe our feelings, notice our bias that's coming up, notice them. And if we're safe, I don't want you in a conversation where you're not safe. Proceed with curiosity and wonder. And that means if you're part of the dominant culture, you've got an opportunity to shift from being the knower to the learner, to do some deep listening.
Amy, real fast, I want to jump in here on that slide on the O. Observe your emotions and the feelings of others. So what you said is, to observe your feelings. That's what you said, right? And I think that it's huge, for us to become aware of the feelings of others. How is this coming across to them? Yeah.
Right.
Thank you for that.
Which is why, Eugene, you want to check your impact. So often when I'm teaching, I don't know how my words land on other people. And I'll actually just ask, how did that land on you? How did that come across to you? Or what was the impact of my words? You want to be careful not to plant a seed for negativity. Oh, did I hurt your feelings?
Right.
Just check. And honestly, it works really well with my husband too. On a regular basis, I'll say, all right, how'd that land on you? And about 80% of the time I did it okay. But sometimes he hasn't revealed something that's going on and he'll go, that didn't land well. And I'll go, okay, what? Let's just take a breath. And so that's my opportunity to drop into listening and hold space.
And I love your pointing to that this is a courageous process, right? This does require us to be courageous. And what you said about observe my feelings and, notice my resistance coming up and, take a breath and reset, but push in, right? Continue to lean in, be courageous, because what that person has to offer is so valuable to us.
So valuable. It's intriguing. I'm allowed to say it. They gave me permission. When I was working with the National Council of Jewish Women here in my metro area, one of the things they did, I've got 5 workshops, and believe it or not, it takes 5 90-minute workshops really to wrap your mind around this skill. So please don't think you're going to walk away with cultural intelligence, because this is courageous and strong work. So these ladies, so these are women that identify with the dominant culture and they identify with the non-dominant culture, being Jewish. So they live with a tension. And so because they're educated and the most philanthropic group I've ever met, just extraordinary women that want to give back, they realized after the workshops, they started, how are we impacting the community that we're trying to serve? And I had them start working just individually, just watching in your own interactions at work and at home. That's where we're going to start. Let's love you first and just start cleaning up. If relationships need to be cleaned up one-on-one, hear people and love on people. And then we shifted the next month over to what the impact of the organization. And it occurred to one woman, and she actually called me and in a panic because she realized that they're giving school supplies away to children in need. And more often than not in my area, it's children of color and Black children. And when the children and parents come for school supplies, they separate the parents and the children because they have this wonderful intention of making sure that the kids get to choose. And isn't that really cool that the kids get to choose and kind of go shopping on their own? And it all of a sudden occurred to this lady, she went, oh shit, oh my God, we are pulling parents from their children. We have got to stop doing that. I mean, she just came in hot with making a decision. I'm like, hold up. Cultural intelligence starts with compassion for you first and includes the people around you. Tell me about this program. We unpacked it a little bit and I said, it sounds like you're doing some good. We're getting school supplies into kids' hands. And she goes, yeah. And I'm like, can we not throw out the baby with the bathwater? And she goes, well, but, and I'm like, okay. So one of the things that you're going to do is go back to your colleagues and go, so what part isn't serving? And she goes, well, how do we find out? And I said, just like the guy with the flag, Jeff, how about you ask? Oh, and same response. I can do that? Oh, well, yeah, yeah, you can do that. You can ask, what's the impact if your child comes with me, and maybe give those mamas a choice as opposed to insisting, particularly as a white woman. Oh, so they ended up eventually changing elements of the program that were more in service of the community that they intended to, but they had to check their impact first.
Certainly. And we are also afraid of making a mistake, right? And the mistake is not daring, right? It's not daring to make a mistake because otherwise we remain in our silos and we never get related. So Eugene, we have questions in the queue. I know that we have questions that we have planned to ask Amy, and I think we can get both things done. Can we check in the queue first?
Actually, I have a question first. And then we'll go to the queue. Just, you know what? No, let's go to the queue. Which means that Anne, you're up.
Hi. Thank you so much, Dr. Let's get it right. Narishkin.
I'm Amy. Dr. Amy or
Hi,
Amy?
Dr. Amy.
It's fine, a lot easier.
Okay.
When I'm in
But-
white spaces, I'm typically Amy. And when I'm in spaces with people of color, I'm either Dr. Narishkin or Dr. Amy, whatever I'm fine with.
Narishkin. Yeah, it's a great name. I love it. All
That's
right.
my
So,
husband.
yeah. Well, I love your slides and I love your logo. Just to say, that's really clear and beautiful.
Thank you.
And the thing I'm wondering about is when I look at the 5 C's, there's a word you've been using that's a C word that I wonder why it's not on the list, and it's curiosity. You've been using it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Curiosity is it's so key.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm just curious why curiosity isn't on the list.
Curiosity is actually on the list. It's number 1.
I think it's the first
Number
one.
Oh, I thought courage was number 1.
I can re-show you. That's not a
No,
problem.
I must have missed it. I got courage as the first one.
Well, you know what I love? I don't think is courage on there. I think courage is not on there.
Hold on one second.
Interesting.
And we're going back. Look at this. We can go backwards. That's so funny.
I
There we
love
go.
it. Oh, there, and
They're both
courage is
there.
the
Yeah,
third
I
one.
thought
They're
so.
there. They're
I
both
thought
there.
so.
See?
Wow. How interesting that I got that, really.
Well, you know what, Anne? The brain sees what it's ready for. And so
Right.
there's no
Right.
shame or blame here. What's really intriguing is I've thought a lot about this order. Curiosity is like so number 1. If you don't have a
Yeah.
mindset of growth,
Right.
cultural intelligence ain't going to happen for you, right?
Right.
But that's when we come in hot, particularly those of us that identify with the dominant culture in any country in the world. If we come in hot, it's off-putting. But Americans are particularly known for saying, "Oh, I was just curious." I'm like, you got to slow down, babe, right? We've got to get the contemplation piece in there and think about our thought and our actions.
Right.
But so often when we slow down, then we get a little scared because we have to consider their context. And so it does take courage. So Thank you.
Yeah. Wow, that's so interesting. Yeah. Thank you. I'm glad to see it's on the list.
Thank you.
Okay, I
And
passed
how-
muster.
And how crazy of me to say courage wasn't on there, because of course we're talking about courage, and of course courage is on there. See what you started, Anne?
Well, actually, Lane, courage wasn't on that list until a year ago. And I was doing a training. I had so normalized cultural intelligence for myself. It didn't even occur to me that I was expressing courage.
Right.
And then the shit hit the fan in a workshop. And I had to address a client, one of their employees went off the rails. He was so angry with me as a white person doing this work. And the HR hadn't gotten to him and explained that we're doing cultural intelligence and not DE&I. And he thought I was being way too gentle. And he went off on me. And I had to get in front of that situation really fast and get with the CEO. And I noticed how scared I was. And as I sat with that and later journaled about it, it was like, dang, this work takes courage. And oh my God, it's missing from my list, Lane. So yeah, I'm a work in progress.
Aren't we all? Thank God.
Mm.
T. Mitchell. And is it possible for you to not only unmute yourself, but come on camera? T. Mitchell.
Let's come back to them.
Right.
Let's go to Rebekah.
Hi, Rebekah.
Hi, Amy. Thank you so much. This is so interesting already. And I'm really interested in the training, and I'll probably follow up with you about that. I'm reading right now Ian Leslie's Conflicted, and there's a lot of connection with what you're talking about. And one of the things that is coming up for me is that one of the chapters I read recently was about how, us white people are only 15% of the population. in the world, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And so
Not
when
many
you
people
say,
know that. Not people.
yeah, and when you say dominant culture, it's
Right.
like, oh, that hurts.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's like, even that phrase is like, that's not true. We're dominant, we're dominating, but we're not dominant in the sense of being the most populous, or, you know. So I just thought that was an interesting thing to look at. And I wonder if you have any thoughts about that.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you. And it's interesting to, if I may point out, it's more often than not that a fellow white person will be uncomfortable with the word dominant than somebody from an underrepresented group. And because our intent isn't to dominate, but the culture. Dominant, and this shows up in my workshops, a dominant culture is the one that's the most powerful and influential and making the rules for everybody else. That's what I mean by dominant. Do I mean Rebekah means to be dominating? By all means, no, you wouldn't have shown up here if you meant to be. Your intentions are spot on. I just recognize that, for example, my pastor is an African-American pastor who I started this journey with after Michael Brown's murder in 2014. And I'm a career-long educator, and I'm a public school teacher by training. I trained public school teachers, so you've got to reach and teach every kid. But it wasn't until Michael Brown's death that I really began to understand how important context is. And when I'm in my African-American church, one of the few white people there, I'm very aware that I represent the dominant culture. Even though this is my church family, if I'm walking down the aisle and somebody is sitting in a pew and they say, "Good morning, Dr. Amy," I'm very intentional about sitting down with them to have a conversation, so we're eyeball to eyeball, and I don't stand over anybody. So it's just I'm using the term dominant culture so we can be aware of the power differential, and that's all. Just so that I level the playing field, just like I would when I'm teaching. And like at church right now, I don't teach children in classrooms. Now I teach grownups in boardrooms. But when I'm at church, children will come up and say, "Hi, Miss Amy." And I'll be very quick to get down on my knee so that we're eyeball to eyeball. And it's not an adult standing over a child. Same. I just want to level the playing field. Does that make sense, Rebekah?
No, thank you. And it wasn't like intended as a criticism, but it's just an awareness piece that I've only
absolutely.
recently become aware of myself.
Yeah, I didn't take it as criticism, and I love that you asked me that question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kyle has her hand, their hand up.
Yeah, but there's this Q here that I
I apologize, Eugene.
You let me take care of the hands, all right, Dr. Amy.
Yes,
I want to just check in with Team Mitchell again. Going once, going twice. All right. Alex?
Hi, thank you for this presentation. My question is about the relationship to power within thinking how to say this. The only way I can say it, predominantly monocultural organizations. Most of the work I've been doing has been within predominantly white Catholic church and institutions. And oftentimes we're coming up against leaders who may be curious and may practice listening, but are unwilling to shift their predominant way of being in control and exhibiting leadership. So I'm just wondering if you could talk more about cultural intelligence in terms of transforming institutions that may be monocultural.
Damn, you you ask a simple question. That's sarcasm. That's not a simple question you're asking. And I have worked with a predominantly white male oriented church, not the Catholic Church, but a different denomination. And I remember when the white guy pastor said to me, we don't have any diversity in our church. I was hired by the organization because they were working to appeal to the Hispanic population, and they wanted to grow their market, right? They're a church, but they wanted to grow their reach. And what was interesting is I had them take the IDI, because we love, in dominant white culture in the United States, we love our empirical data, right? And my opinion adds up to like nothing. So we had them take the IDI, and oh my gosh, look at that. They were in minimization. And one pastor was like, oh my gosh, I've been minimizing my congregants. And I'm like, well, yeah, welcome to the status quo. That's what we do in society. We minimize. But the nice part is, now you've been minimizing, and now there's a path to something cooler, better, accepting and adapting. And he goes, but we're all white. And I'm like, oh, you're so cute. You think there's no differences in your church? I wonder what it's like for a woman to be led by a man. I wonder how many people are not talking about their depression. I wonder what kind of differences and unique ideas and innovations are not showing up. I wonder if everyone feels so valued, loved, and engaged in your church that the love spills out the door and they can't help but talk about it in their community. And he's like, I don't think that's happening. And I'm like, you will once you get out of minimization. So part of the answer to the question is, once people know that they've been doing this and they start to imagine what's possible with regard to collaboration, innovation, profit, right? For some, that's pretty motivating, Alex. When we realize how we've been minimizing ourselves and not loving us, because you can't really love anybody else until you love you. When you start seeing the possibility of loving you, it's pretty motivating to want to extend that love. That might be, in cultural intelligence, we're always looking for the way in. What would be motivating to your group of leaders?
Okay, yeah, so I'm working with an organization right now where there's a group of women who feel minimized by the white man who's leading the organization. And they're trying to figure out how to, like, they're working so hard to try to figure out how to communicate to him their experience without losing their jobs. Because they feel like if they say the truth, they're going to lose their job.
There's a good chance they will.
So that's where I'm asking from.
Yeah, leadership comes from the top and filters through the organization. And if you are the person on the outside as a consultant and you've been hired by that leadership, you're the one that's in a position of power and can speak to power in a way that they can't. They can't afford to lose their jobs. Thank you for recognizing that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for seeing the whole situation and recognizing the women.
Thank you. Norman.
I just had a question about the use of the word intelligence, because that to me says that there's nothing left to learn for the person who has the intelligence. And awareness would probably be a better word. It's inoffensive, I think.
Point taken. I hear you want people to be aware. Oh, are you equating intelligence as being done?
Yes.
Oh, okay. And I'm so glad, because whenever you're talking with people, you've got to kind of get on the same page with vocabulary. For me, intelligence is always something that's being developed. It's a growth mindset. which is why cultural intelligence typically shows up in the literature and the research. It's something that we're developing all along. I actually need somebody to be more than just aware of my uniqueness. I actually need them to approach me with intelligence, meaning be aware of my context and also be compassionate and courageous.
Well,
Kind of that whole blend. But yeah.
We're just looking at it from my point of view.
Yep.
I think about intelligence tests.
Ew. Yeah. Ew. Gosh. Bummer.
And that's finished.
Yeah, I hear
Wrong,
you.
but it's finished.
Okay.
So.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Are you an educator, Norman?
No, I'm not. I'm a student.
May I ask you what you are a student of? You can say no.
Life.
A student of life.
Yeah. I'm 76.
And Norman, have you taken an intelligence test
Oh,
a couple
sure.
of times in your life?
Oh, sure.
Well, no wonder you think it's done. I get that.
No, I mean, they think it's done.
That's what I mean.
And
Norman, you and I are never done.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you to both of you, because what that puts me in mind of is, first of all, that we said, like we said, learning's never done. Sorry, Eugene, but also that Chemnitz asked a question a while back about semantics. With that, were you going to bring up, Eugene, about what is the difference between cultural competency and cultural intelligence, if there is any difference?
Different terminologies. I have chosen to use the word cultural intelligence. That's what's in the research and has been around for a couple of decades. Cultural competence strikes me is in the way that intelligence strikes Norman, that you're done.
Yes.
And it's also something that I want more than just competence. I want more than just somebody being aware. I want it all. I want emotional intelligence. I want cultural intelligence. I'm so demanding. I get it. I've got 4 kids, my poor kids.
Yeah, and we should demand more of ourselves, right? Particularly now, it's necessary, because it's not going to happen by osmosis and nobody's going to do it for us.
It isn't. And typically my target market or the folks that hire me have that growth mindset. So if an organization wants to check a box or avoid litigation, that's not me. There are other people who are doing that work. The work I'm doing, I'm typically with an organization for what would be like an academic year, 8 to 10 months. And we're developing our cultural intelligence. And it starts with getting to know you and loving on you. And then it's developing cultural self-awareness. What is it about your culture that keeps you from hearing other people? What blocks you? What hinders you? And then it's time to develop other awareness. And the organization I'm working with right now they were like, well, we'll go ask about others, what their experience is. And I'm like, no, you're going to do your homework first. You're going to read and learn about your own culture. You're going to read and learn about their culture. And then with that body of knowledge and a broken heart, then you can start talking with people, not before.
Indeed. Yeah, thank you. And I just wanted to let people know that you have a blog that's got all kinds of great information in it, all kinds of great tutorials. And for people who want to learn more about this, we'll put the blog into the chat, but absolutely.
Thank you, Lane.
Thank you.
So then we have Tina and then Kyle.
Hi, good afternoon, Dr. Amy. Thank you. All right, I'm going to put a context in my question. There's consciousness. I think I have extreme self-consciousness, and there's curiosity, but I think I tend to have a lot of reserve. In addition, like you talk about Americans being very curious, maybe more of my Swiss heritage comes in where I tend to be more circumspect. So anyway, I'm thinking of the situation with Jeff. And I'm thinking, all right, suppose I had been Jeff, I had inadvertently or just had something up and found out that it was, potentially hurtful. And the guy sort of said, well, I didn't know how to ask him about it. And I identified with that because I think I would worry that he would think maybe I had some sort of hidden agenda about asking him if it bothered him. That's where my self-consciousness would lead me. Like I would, so in terms of maybe context, how would I think about approaching having a courageous conversation with someone in a way that is effective, I guess.
I
Understand
feel
my
you.
question? You know, like I would worry that it would backfire, and maybe it would, and maybe, but I wouldn't want to unintentionally do harm, I think is my
Mhm.
concern in these situations.
Mhm. Thank you. Thank you for wanting to take care of the heart and the soul of the person you're talking with. Not everyone is thinking about that. They're just thinking about what it is they want to understand, right? And you're already thinking about the other person. So thank you for that. Thank you for your concern. May I provide some context around your concern so that you know it's just not just you?
Sure.
Okay, well, I asked the question at the beginning of my very first workshop every time, what makes it so hard to talk with people that are different? And you just listed them. I don't know them. I don't know how it's going to come across. It's awkward. I don't know what to say. And it's predominantly a white problem or a dominant culture problem. Because if you think about it, when you're part of the dominant culture or identify with it, no matter what your skin color is or however you identify, it's kind of like being right-handed in a right-handed world. It just works. It's not until I had I've got 4 adult children and I've got 2 righties and 2 lefties. And it wasn't until I got 2 lefties that I realized that the can opener doesn't work. The desk doesn't support them. The spiral gets in the way and the ink always smears. It never occurred to me that we lived in a right-handed world and 1 in 10 people are left-handed and it works for me. And now suddenly I have to be sensitive. And that's what it's like for whites. We don't know what we don't know until we do some reading, which is why I make my groups get their butts in gear and learn some stuff, right? So one of the part of the problem that we don't know what we don't know and why we don't know what to say is because the average white person knows 1 black person and the average black person knows 8 white people. And that's partly because of demographics and how they play out in the United States. We're predominantly white in the United States. That's changing fast. There are now more babies of color born than white babies as of now. So that those demographics are changing fast. But brains tend to hang out with brains that are like them. And that's true across differences. And we learn white history in school. We're not inclined to engage with people who are different. And we can't see a systemic racism. And so we don't have any language to talk with people that are different. Which is why, Tina, when you come across somebody that's kind of, you feel that trigger of, I don't know what to do or I don't know what to say. If you can shift from needing to know to needing to learn, really helps. So if you shift from knower to learner, if you want to avoid some humiliation, you come in with humility. It's something I have to do all the time. I'm daily humiliated, but the good part for me is I get to go write a blog about it, right? So one of the things that's really helpful to do is slow down, to do the stop, take a breath, and after you decided you're safe and you've seen yourself, your bias, and you've seen them, and if you're safe, you can proceed with curiosity and wonder and ask, may I ask you a question? Rather than assuming you're going to ask and that you can ask, which is a power thing.
Yes.
May I ask a question? And be willing to take no. I've never gotten a no, but I'm always ready for it. And so my husband looks like a white American dude, but he didn't grow up in this country and he developed an American accent. Anytime he comes across a foreign-born national, he comes in hot. He wants to ask him a question because he wants to connect. But he scares the shit out of them a lot of times, right? He doesn't know their background. And he goes, what do I do? And I said, just give him a little your context first. Slow it down and say, all my family's in France and I was raised in Rio de Janeiro and in Rotterdam and in Bangkok. I'd love to know where you're from. I hear an accent. So by providing a little bit of your context, you know that they know that you're genuinely reaching out to connect as opposed to just being curious. How does that land on you, Tina, what I just said?
That's really helpful. I think it was kind of like, yeah, I mean, like I kind of tried to do that with asking my question, like trying to put the context of where I was coming from so I could kind of get the, so yeah, so doing that. I mean, I always feel like I don't really have too much of an issue with humility, I think, with being having humility and being a learner. I think that's how I come, but sometimes, yeah, getting tripped up in the words, but just thinking, may I ask you a question, and giving a sense of where I'm coming from, so the person at least doesn't say, well, what's this lady's deal? I think is how I would think I would come across if I didn't do that. So I think that's helpful. Thank you.
That's a beautiful summary. And what's awesome about you, Tina, is that if somebody doesn't want to talk, it's not your fault. It's just they don't want to talk. It's not a good day, or they don't want to talk to a white person. I don't know, but it's just, maybe it's an introvert, that person, you know.
I can relate to
that. But you've eased in, and particularly because you're female, we're expected to be soft in society, and I always find that really ironic. Being an activist, I'm often told, Amy, can you say that a little softer? And I'm like, no, not always.
Right.
So, white ladies are supposed to be soft. Elaine, I don't know what your experience is, but we're supposed to be soft.
Okay, and there's that. Thank you, Tina. Thank you so much.
So we have Kyle and Sage, but Kyle, before I have you ask your question, there is a question that I want to that's in the chat from Kimness. I love that, because Dr. Amy, you have been using, white culture. So here's Kimness. I'm curious, from your perspective, what's considered white culture?
Oh, that's beautiful.
Right? Thank you, Kimness.
What's considered white culture? Well, culture, if we just look at that term, culture is what the values, the behaviors that a group of people have in common. So, and not everybody shares all values and behaviors and systems of that culture. What is white culture? The culture I would suggest when I'm using that term is the culture that's the most powerful in making the rules for others, however you define others, in this context. I think that's what I mean. Have I answered your question? I don't know who asked it.
Kimness Fisher.
Kim, can you give me a context for your question? It's really hard to answer questions without context. I need to use my cultural intelligence with your question.
And can I just say, there is absolutely there's a definition of white American culture, particularly organizational culture. And so I'm looking for a link to share. There's a really great PDF, Dr. Okun, O-K-U-N, and I will put that in, but you can also look at Paulo Freire and several other authors. If you look up white American culture or white organizational culture, you will find a lot of articles and expose conversations about what that is. So individualism is one of those things, right? Perfectionism is one of those things. So you know this, and I think that's what he's asking, Dr.
Oh, okay. So that's one of my workshops. We actually define the characteristics of dominant US culture. Answering a question doesn't hold up. D'Angelo does a great job on white fragility. Debbie Irving wrote a book, Waking Up White, and I love Tim Wise's book, White Like Me. But there isn't, how that question is answered is going to depend on the person and their experience with white culture, within white culture. But I'm definitely looking at in terms of dominant culture, the culture in a country that's the one in power and making the rules for other people. But yeah, there's lots of resources defining it. Thank you, Elaine.
Could I butt in? I'm Kimness, by the way.
Hey, Kimness.
Hi.
Hey. Yeah, I'm at work right now, but I stepped in a little corner where nobody can hear me right now. So
Thank you.
no problem. What the reason I was asking, because part of what because I do a lot of facilitation myself, and what I usually do is try and tell people to tease them the difference between what a cultural being from the planet and cultural socially. So usually when I talk with, especially when I'm in a group full of quote unquote white people, I ask them, well, where's your heritage from? Right? And a lot of people say, oh, well, Germany or Scotland or Italian, something like that. So then I embrace them to start, or I invite them to start investigating some aspects of that so they have something honorable to hold on to, because at least from my perspective, at least within the American context, right, the white culture has a lot of dominating and negative connotations. So one way of helping people be more compassionate with themselves is the positive aspects of their own heritage, so they have something to lean on to, so then they can show compassion for other cultures.
Oh my goodness. Do you hear the compassion, the cultural intelligence? Is it, how do you say your name, sir? Is it Keems?
Kim like chemist. Yeah, Kim like chemistry, Ness like Ness. Chemness.
Chemness. Thank you. Chemness. The cultural intelligence you are expressing is extraordinary. Asking somebody to acknowledge their heritage, to see themselves, is the beginning of feeling compassion for another. So thank you for what you're doing. And not, I'm assuming you're a person of color, Chemness?
Yes.
And the fact that you're doing that for your fellow white citizens, that's gracious of you. Thank you. And one of the things that I teach, just to clarify, that culture isn't good or bad. It isn't right or wrong. It's how it's used. So if you think about it, American dominant culture is a market-driven, it's not even a market-driven economy anymore. Now we are a market-driven society. And to your point, Lane, it gets stuff done, right? We have an economy that continues to bounce back and continues to, the dollar is the most powerful thing in the world. So our economy works well. And the other side of that is that we're a task-oriented, individualistic, perfectionist society that's competitive as a result of that market-driven. And it can be cold, and it can get things all whitewashed. And to Kamni's point, it erases, whitewashing, meaning it erases all of our individuality and our uniqueness. And it can have a cold impact, and yet it rocks in the world. So that it kind of depends on, kind of like that flag. It's life-threatening. People have been lynched under that flag. And to the other guy, it's just a symbol of his history. What? This is why we have to be aware of the context of the people we're talking with.
Indeed. And having to have things defined and in boxes and controllable is definitely an impact of white culture. It's a white supremacist thing. And as Alex says, we need to study it. White people need to study white culture because it's unnamed, it's unquestioned, and it's invisible to most white people. And if you're not, the focus often is, oh, let me study about these, people of color so I understand them better. And you know what? You got to understand yourself better and see what people are dealing with in order to fully be able to impact the change that you're trying to make. So just thanks for this. Yeah, thanks for this conversation, these questions, folks. Sorry for that sidebar, Eugene.
No, I just, Lane, I was going to may I piggyback off you?
Sure. And we want to make sure we get to Kyle and Seja as well. Go for it.
I was only going to add that it isn't just white people that need to know about the dominant culture in the United States. When my pastor and I have conversations about how dominant culture has every once in a while infiltrates his sermons, and seeing human beings as just resources and commodities. And he's like, oh my God, I never would have seen that. Thank you. And yeah, it's just an opportunity to become aware of dominant culture and how it's playing out in all our lives. Because minimization is the status quo, we are not encouraged to take a look at it.
As we say, right, racism dehumanizes all of us, every single one of us.
It does. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Kyle, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for making space for my question. Well, I had one point and one question, or one offer and one question. The question that I wanted to ask was what suggestions like the presenters might have for people who lack exposure, maybe just due to proximity to having the access to other cultures at the way that they may need to learn. And also so maybe some suggestions on how people can cope with that. And also I wanted to offer that if anyone, I love offering unsolicited advice. If anyone suffers or is experiencing lack of exposure, I am willing to be a resource. I don't represent all Black people or in America, but you wouldn't know that. So I'm happy if anyone wants to make a friend, because I agree with the part of the presentation that I think a lot of these conversations are missing, which is starting with these more maybe abstract but human development qualities that allow for compassion. And so I'll offer that and leave a name or a number in the chat. Please don't feel pressured, but everyone should feel welcome. And the question again was about exposure, how to bypass the limitations of geographical exposure to other cultures. Thanks.
Kyle, what's prompting you to ask that question when you already answered it, in part at least?
Well, it's an old question. I had it about 45 minutes, but I guess I had time to wait. Let me zero in, be serious, because I recognize that there's often some misalignment between people's how do I say it? I'm from Tennessee. I live in New York, but I'm from Tennessee. It's very conceivable. It's very conceivable that someone can live in an area and never meet someone of a non-dominant culture. Hey, how's it going? And without that context of interpersonal communication, it lends itself to we're humans. We fill in answers for what we don't know. So if someone has the awareness that they're lacking that information, then I tend to be somewhat sympathetic, because I know what it's like to not know things and to feel lost in that way. So I think that depending on where we're from regionally, to answer your question, what was at the heart of my question, I think that I recognize regional differences often allow us to otherize people with terms that don't take the conversation anywhere, useful.
Thank you, Carl. Let's let Dr. Amy answer your question. And it sounds like we might have to make you an ambassador. So thank you for that.
He has. He is an ambassador. He already is. Part of the answer to his question, which is, it depends on the developmental stage of the person you're talking with, right? All y'all that have shown up today are already expressing curiosity and courage and compassion. You've got a growth mindset if you're here. And so I'm thinking that Kyle's question's already been answered, that y'all are exposing yourself to differences And you're probably watching on Netflix and YouTube shows written by different perspectives. If somebody that you know is in denial, for example, way down in denial, they just need to go to the Mexican restaurant down the street and start noticing differences. So somebody who's in minimization is definitely curious, but has been taught by society to downplay differences. And we need to we need to explore differences safely. And they need, at all stages, need to feel invited in and not called out. Particularly because I'm female and I can't get away with calling people out. The moment, I'll just dial back, that learning takes place when we feel loved and we feel safe. And the brain won't learn unless you feel loved and safe. And so you want to invite people in. And I understand that there are problem pointer outers in society, and we need those folks. And that's not where I'm hanging out, and nor can I get away with hanging out being white female. I can get away with inviting people in. If I alienate somebody, I lose my opportunity to influence and help them grow. But if I can stay in relationship and meet people where they are, like, tell me, why is that flag important to you? Rather than, nope, take it down, right? Why is that flag important? And let's explore that. I stay in relationship and look, I got the guy to take his flag and keep his flag down, right? No condemnation. So I think the answer to the question is, how can you show love to this person in a way that's meaningful for them, Kyle? And I love that you're offering a relationship. That's so dear.
Kyle has put his email address in the chat there for folks. I love the email address.
That's so cute. So dear.
So we have Seja, and then we're going to have Dr. Felicia Williams-Cozy as the last question, because we want to also have time for Dr. Amy to speak about some other stuff that we're going to ask about. Seja.
Really, thank you, Kyle, for your perspective and your presence. And I love the title of your email address too. It's great. And that connects sort of, I have maybe a circular question. One of the things I notice about the difficulties I have communicating with other cultures is me. I thought I've done a lot of work, and I found out I haven't done all the work I need to do. Ouch. That hurts. So got notes about a little bit of notes here.
Seja, we're all learning. I feel you.
Thank you. So yeah, I have to keep doing my own work. And one of the little things I've done has just been watching TV programs that always include a variety of cultures and ethnicities to just broaden. And one of my friends said, well, you notice a couple of people of another ethnicity in some commercials lately, and I see it a lot, and I'm really thankful for it, because the more we just see ourselves in others and normalize that, the stronger we get into trying it in more of real life. And the other thing that bothers me, or that gets in my way, is that I'm going to be 80 in a few days, and there's another ouch. Not that I mind 80, but what I mind is that I'm losing my memory somewhat. And right now, what it has to do with this is names and current identifications. So when we're talking about, our gender labels, for example, it's driving me nuts because I can, I'm lucky if I can remember somebody's name, but what I can remember is kindness. And I just keep hoping that no matter what mistakes I make, that people will understand the kindness. And going back to my upbringing, the cultural upbringing, I noticed I grew up in an area where that was very well off and very good schools, quote unquote, if you call them white schools, good schools, with a lot of offerings. But one of the things I thought I learned or knew was that white cultural life had reflected being smart or not, and if you got it or not. So if you don't get it, then you're not cool, or you're not with it, or you don't go to the next best level of education or popularity or whatever it was. Well, that's all bullshit. But it took me to going to Ohio, to another white community actually, but at least to see that things are done differently in other places. And at first it seemed really, I don't know, unlike another world, but that's what we need. I just needed that, and I keep needing that. So I don't know, if you have anything to say about that. I don't know. I guess my answer to myself is just to use kindness, because I don't know that I'm going to always get it right.
Yeah, kindness with yourself, knowing that you're not going to get it right, knowing I'm not going to get it right. I blow it regularly, and giving yourself grace. I think, Sage, it's pretty important. Sometimes when I make a mistake, not sometimes, I'll go and sit with the humiliation or the pain, and just feel with me and go, oh man. I make light of it, but it's not light. 2 blogs ago, I really blew it. And I've got many mentors in my life of various colors and backgrounds. And I had something to learn about how I had inadvertently minimized by not taking an action step. And it made for a good blog. And it was hard to post that, right? So I feel you.
Yeah.
What is the difference between grace and compassion?
That's a great Eugene question.
I was just about to say, right, is nobody knows better. Nobody can answer that question for you better than you can. So you get to take that within yourself, Sage, and go, okay, what is the difference for me between grace and compassion? Right. And which takes me to this, and this is for Sasha and all of us, really. So we've heard that, love your neighbor as you love yourself. The question is, how much do I love me? Because I can't love my neighbor if I don't love me. Amen. And the other 2 things real quick, Sasha, is be kind to Sasha. And happy birthday.
Thank you.
Good stuff, man. I love Race Talk Revolution. You guys, man. Whew. Dr. Felicia Williams-Cozy.
Dr. Amy, I just want to say I have been fascinated with you from the first moment you opened your mouth. And so much of the truth that you're presenting so simply. And my experience is I love how you talked about brains and our commonality based on how our brains are. I used to do work in the justice system, and I would have people go back to when they were children and talk about what they learned. What did they learn about being male or being female? And when I would get to, what did you learn about being white? I got blank stares.
Yeah.
Like, okay, but what did you learn about Black people? Oh, all kinds of lists. But there was just a sudden realization that it's like a fish swimming in water. I don't know anything about the water. So I appreciate you bringing it to us in a left-handed, right-handed way, where we could immediately start to see some of the differences. One of the questions that I have for you, you started out by saying you're a cultural intelligence strategist, not a DE&I consultant. And I think I appreciate the differentiation as you expressed it. And my curiosity is, how do we work together? I as a DEI and I consultant, and you as a cultural intelligence strategist.
Oh, thank you for asking. That's a fabulous question. I would suggest, and what I have found in my training, is that cultural intelligence is the platform that DE&I can launch from. Yeah. And I know that because I finished working last year with the National Association of Women in Construction Board, National Board, and there was a DE&I consultant, African-American woman, who helps organizations with compliance. And she did my training, my 5 workshops and ambassador groups. And she and I we got to put our heads together afterwards. She would call me a couple of times and she goes, all right, so I've got a mixed group and I want to make sure I hit everyone. I want to wake everybody's brain up. And we had this vocabulary established that we were going to start with making sure that people saw themselves, no matter how they identified, see them and love them. When they have that in place, like Eugene is suggesting, then you have the bandwidth to see others. The difference between the two is DE&I training. I call myself not a DE&I consultant because DE&I training historically, and maybe this is a bias around it, is teaching about the other. However, and cultural intelligence starts with your expertise is other awareness, and my expertise starts with self-awareness. And then we're going to use this self-awareness to develop cultural self-awareness. And then from cultural self-awareness, we're going to start with that skill set and that heart in place. We're going to start hearing how this system of minimization is impacting people. And we're going to start putting something in place that's a whole lot better. And this is where the DE&I expert can say, this isn't working have I answered your question, or is I clear as mud?
You've answered my question and made it clear that I need to change my title because the work that I do is what you just described. It's not from that, let's start by seeing other. It's by, let's start looking within and seeing self. And then from self, how do we relate to all? So thank you. That has been the greatest gift to me from today.
Awesome. Dr. Felicia, I have a feeling you're already doing culturally intelligent DEI.
Oh, good. I'll just bring it all together.
Yeah, you're just, there is DEI that is actually based in polarization, kind of just calling people out, and definitely has its place. There's also culturally intelligent DEI, working from acceptance and adaptation. I have a feeling you're already doing it.
Yeah. Thank you.
If you reach out to me, I can share with you research on cultural intelligence so that you can broaden your vocabulary.
Thank you so much. I will.
Before I pass this back to Lane, I just want to just express my gratitude for this community, Race Talk Revolution community. I mean, every week I am awed, not only by the guests, but by the questions and by how engaged everyone is. Thank you so very much. My heart is just so full of just joy because of you always showing up here. Thank you so much. Keeps me wanting to just keep going. Lane.
So thank you. Yeah, thank you, everybody. Wow, my heart is really full, cup overflow. And talk about your book. What's it called and who's it for?
Oh my goodness. I'm working on another book right now, so I can show it to you.
But wait, there's more.
I wrote this when I first started working. It's called Awoke in Progress, an interactive journal for developing intercultural consciousness. These are some of my first blogs. And there are elements about this book that are so embarrassing, but I figure, you know what? My growth is something you can witness. My blogs are a heck of a lot better now, and I have a lot more depth to my understanding, but this is my book. As embarrassing as it is, it's okay. I own it. I'm growing. What was your second question? I'm sorry, Lane.
Well, that wasn't one. Just who's it for, right? What if where people go out and buy that book, what are they going to get? What's in it for them?
Oh, what I did was I compiled my blogs and I put it into a journal so that there's space in between, and you can write about what's resonating with you and how you're growing. And I continue to write blogs in that same format. Here's what's going on, and here are the how-tos so that you can take it and apply it.
Brilliant.
Thank you for asking.
Yeah, absolutely marvelous. So I'm putting all of the links into the chat, and for people who are watching the recording, you can find Dr. Amy Narishkin at empoweringpartners.com. And please check out her blog because she really got some good stuff. We're so pleased for you to be here. And do you have any last words, like within a minute, anything that you need to say, a call to action, anything that you haven't yet shared? And I know we could talk about this for a long time.
Oh, awesome. Call to action, stop, slow down, take a breath, move into your conversations with grace and compassion. I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn. I'd love for you to share my blog. And also keep in mind if there's anyone in your network that needs this work, that would help me. And then finally, keep showing up for doing this. What Lane and Eugene are doing, and to Kyle's point, exposing people to differences, this is spot on. Keep doing this.
Yay. Thank you. We're so, so grateful to have you with us today. Thank you for everything you shared. Thank you for the wonderful conversation. And thank you, all of you, for being here with us today. Please join us next Wednesday for another inclusive, courageous conversation about race. Our speakers will be Mr. Silas Kilcarney and Mr. John Woods, Jr. of Braver Angels, which is a citizens organization uniting red and blue Americans in a working alliance to depolarize America and contribute to a stronger democracy. Until then, we remind you to connect with people who don't look like you or live like you. And remember that we're all in this together, and that it's going to take all of us expressing our voices and working together to create a world that works for everybody. Eugene, please close us out.
Man, there's not much more to say except for that. Again, we are grateful for you guys showing up. Have a fantastic day. Go out there and multiply this consciousness, because together we will change the world, because your voice matters.
We love you, everybody. Have a great week. See you soon.